Hello, everybody. Welcome to Symmetry Solutions Strategies. This is Natasha Helfer Parker. About every Friday, we try to come on as a team of providers here at Symmetry Solutions to answer questions that we get from the public, depending on different topics that come in. We've had a lot coming in recently that have to do with dealing with COVID in different ways. And today I'm really pleased to have three of the providers join me from Symmetry Solutions. I've got Jenny Elledge, who is located out of Florida. I've got Lisa Butterworth, who's in Idaho, and Jana Spangler, who's in Utah. And I'm coming at you currently from Kansas, although I'll be back in Utah here fairly soon. So anyway, we got a question that had to do with boundaries, and the person was asking, that the person had said something along the lines of, I'm really having trouble with feeling like my boundaries are being respected during this time in, wherever we're at in quarantine or stay-at-home orders or kind of social distancing, or all these different terms that we have currently for what we're all trying to engage with each other in. So she didn't really expand on that question much, and I thought about it from two different perspectives. I think that there are boundaries that many of us are worried about or dealing with in regards to outside of our home environments, and we're also dealing with boundary issues within our home environment. So today, we are going to actually just address kind of outside of our home environments, since many states are currently considering kind of making stay-at-home orders be more lenient or moving more towards social distancing. I know that several states are starting to open up restaurants and nail salons, and dentist appointments are back on track for some people. So we're going to be interacting with each other more than we have in a while. And we thought we'd talk about some of the concerns or some of the things that we see coming up. So I'm just going to start off by just sharing something that my daughter dealt with just a few days ago as a DoorDash deliverer. So she had, there's certain protocols that she's supposed to have. And so she has to wear a mask, and she's supposed to stay 6 feet, at least 6 feet or more away from the door when they deliver, and just make sure that the food is delivered. And so the person opens the door, says thank you, takes the food, and that's it, unless there's other instructions. Well, this person that she was delivering to kind of mocked her or was upset with her because she was 6 feet away from the door. Like, why are you wearing the mask? And why are you being, you're being silly. This is so ridiculous. It just kind of shaming, in a sense, the protocol that she was following, that actually she needs to follow for the job that she currently is engaged in. And I've heard a lot of these kinds of stories. I see a lot of shaming kind of on both sides of the equation. A lot of people being extremely upset with, I had another situation with friends of ours actually in Utah. They were walking outside with their children. It was just, so it's a family of like 6 people. They're going on a neighborhood walk, and people drove by and honked and, yelled things like, you shouldn't be, outside, making us all be in danger, or something like shaming them for being outside. And they were following the protocols too of the state of Utah, which they were saying at the time that as long as you stay away 6 feet from people and you're only with people that you're kind of at home with, it's perfectly fine to be outside and enjoy the weather. And in fact, that was actually one of the things they were encouraging people to do for mental health and kind of activity, physical health, etc. So I'm seeing stories on both sides of this equation. I'm now going to be quiet and open it up to the three of you as far as what you're seeing and how this is an issue of boundaries. So who wants to start us off with some thoughts?
Well, I'll start off just sharing what I'm seeing with my children. So what I'm starting to notice is my kids are understandably really antsy and wanting to get out with their friends and see people to varying degrees based on their personalities. But I'm noticing that not all of their friend groups have the same ideas about this. Some of them just want to have no boundaries and go out and be together now that it's in Salt Lake County. It is now being open to gatherings of of 20 or fewer. There are still recommendations of social distancing within those gatherings. But I think not all of us want to necessarily think about that or hear that. And so I know that our family, we're probably on the more cautious side of the spectrum. And so it's causing problems for my children in feeling like they're having peer pressure to not worry about those rules and just get back together and get on with their lives. So I'm starting to notice this even with my children, with my own considerations of when does my book club start meeting together rather than virtually, where, you know, and everyone has their own ideas about what's okay. And so I can foresee a lot of confusion and difficulty moving forward in trying to decide how we're going to do it, and being kind with each other, that we may not all feel the same way about this issue.
Yeah, what about Jenny and Lisa? What kinds of experiences are you noticing in your areas?
I'm having similar experiences to Jana, where my kids, their friends are starting to kind of want to get together, and it's sort of this in-between time, because right now, just like Utah, today our Idaho recommendations are 10 people or less. So it's a little different, but it's kind of similar that the rules are kind of changing, and we're all kind of trying to feel it out. And I also have noticed that, like, I felt like, because I've been out walking a lot in my neighborhood, that prior to this last week, people were really good at giving me space. And this last week, it seems like people aren't as willing to sort of step off the sidewalk. And, you know, like there seems to be, and I've been approached a couple times, like people, I have my dogs with me, and people were bringing their dogs, and they were about to sniff my dogs. And I'm genuinely concerned, just because we had COVID in my house. So I'm more concerned that I'm going to be spreading COVID to other people, and we don't know for sure yet that dogs, don't carry it. So it was pretty effective for me to just, say, oh, you know what, there was COVID in my house. I don't think you should be letting your dog sniff my dogs. And that immediately backs people right up. They're willing to step back at that point. So I give everybody permission to use that. If people aren't respecting your space, to say there's COVID in my house, people will back up.
You don't always have to be super truthful in your boundary approaches. Is that what you're saying, Lisa?
It's an easy shortcut. It's an easy shortcut to get people to back up, especially if you don't know these people. They're just random people with dogs on the street. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily tell people that you are going to have long interactions with, but random people in your neighborhood, I think I'm personally fine with it. I mean, of course, you're going to have to go with your own ethical whatever situation.
Right. Jenny, what are you noticing in Florida?
Well, in Florida, I had to look it up again, because we don't really have any numbers around how many people we can get together. It's more about what's happening with the economy. So retail stores can be open and restaurants can be open at 25% capacity. But other places like barbers, hairdressers, nail salons, those are closed and we don't know when they can reopen. So as we're thinking about boundaries and what's okay and what's not okay, it's tough. It definitely is tough. I have my oldest daughter works at Publix, which if you're not in Florida, you won't know what that is. That's a major grocery store. And so I've had to kind of limit my interaction with her, because she's constantly exposed to the public, while she's working. And another kiddo of mine has a girlfriend, and they haven't seen each other for 6-7 weeks now. And they're like, okay, at what point do we get to see each other? And it's that's a really good question. We don't exactly know all the answers yet. So it's kind of we're in an experimental phase. And during that time, I think we just need to be a little bit compassionate, because everybody's going to have a different reaction to what's going on.
When I think about this from the perspective of why people are upset, I see two kind of ideas coming up. One is they're annoyed because they're feeling somewhat imposed upon, or like their freedom isn't necessarily feeling honored. And then the other one that people are probably annoyed about is that they feel like their safety is at risk. So we've kind of got like safety on one side of the conundrum versus freedom and independence on the other side of the conundrum. And both of these principles, I think, are fairly important to most of us. I think most of us care about our safety, and most of us care about our freedoms and our rights and things of that nature. But what are your thoughts as to why people may lean in one direction or another? And I know, Jana, you had talked in our meeting prior about maybe like how people have a sense of control or something. Maybe you want to talk a little about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I've noticed that our current situation is putting a certain amount of anxiety and stress on most of us in different ways, very different ways. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and she's like, I keep hearing these stories of how COVID is hard for this person in ways I didn't even imagine, you know? And I keep hearing those. I keep hearing stories about, oh, I didn't realize that that would make that hard. So we're all coming from different places, but we're all dealing with some level of stress and anxiety. And our natural reaction to feeling stress and anxiety is wanting to have some sort of control over that. But it manifests differently in different people based on on personality, on worldviews, on a lot of different things. And so for some people, they want to, you know, safety becomes the way that they are dealing with that anxiety. If I just keep myself separate and away, then all will be well. And for other people, they just want to have their normal life back. And for them, that's how they are dealing with their anxiety, is I just need to act as if things are okay, and then it'll be okay. So, you know, those are just two examples. I think there are probably a number of ways we all try to get control. But when someone else does that naturally differently than we do, sometimes it's hard to get into their mind and their life to understand why they're doing what they're doing. I love the saying that an enemy is a person whose story you don't know. And I feel like that's when we get irritated with other people in the way they're handling things, it's often because we don't understand what's happened. If we knew that they had had COVID in their home, if we knew that their loved one was in the hospital dealing with the fallout of this, and if we knew that this other person, their livelihood is failing because of this, and we really need to get over our social distancing for them to function in their life, maybe we would understand more why people are reacting differently than we are.
Any other thoughts from the panel? Well, I just was thinking about, I was just thinking about, I read in the New York Times yesterday that 80 to 90% of people are like supportive of social distancing measures. And I was thinking, you know, like on the one hand, this is interesting because we're hearing a lot from the people, the small minority of people who aren't, like that's making the news. It's, you know, like it seems to be, and that's interesting from a couple of different perspectives. One, it's interesting because I think that it can be really difficult to be in that position, to be in the position of being, you know, like the 10 to 20% of people who have a very different opinion than the rest of us, right? That can be a difficult position to be in, and that can often make people feel more reactive, right? Like people who are in a minority can often feel like they're not being heard, they're not being respected, they're not understood. And so that can lead to sort of some of the maybe unkindness that, you know, that you were talking about, like with your daughter, having someone lash out at her. And, you know, you combine that with what Jana just said about, you know, like it's very possible that these people own a nail salon or, you know, something where they're not going to be able to pay their bills because social distancing has completely destroyed their ability to work and take care of themselves. Yeah, that was just my thought.
Yeah. Any thoughts from you, Jenny, as far as the challenges that you're seeing and why they prop up the way they do?
Well, I mean, in American culture, I mean, that's always been the tug of war between safety and a sense of freedom. So it's just kind of playing out once again. I was thinking about, boundaries. When we're talking about boundaries, we can make a request to someone, but we can't demand that the other person, respond in the affirmative the way that we would like to. It becomes kind of a negotiation. And so if you're getting upset that your boundaries aren't being met, then you might want to consider, what is your approach? Are you asking in a kind manner? Are you trying to understand where the other person is coming from? This is tough because this is affecting everyone, so we can't please everyone. So we just kind of do the best that we can.
I love that. And I would add to that too, Jenny, just when sometimes you can be super polite, super kind, super nice, be very appropriate in your boundary setting, and you still can't demand or force somebody to, I guess, honor that. So you probably also need to have some strategies, some self-care strategies, or some thinking throughs. What if I do get approached, on the street, like Lisa was talking about, in a way that I'm uncomfortable with? Or what if I'm at the grocery store and there's somebody who doesn't seem to want to, keep the 6 feet approach? Or what if I feel like it's really important to wear a mask and other people aren't wearing a mask, so those, I think you have to decide too, at what point, at the final point, you're the only person that has control over you. And so what are you willing to do in those moments? Do you leave the store? Do you go make a formal complaint? Do you speak to the person? If things start escalating with a person that you're asking to honor a boundary and you start having an argument or something, what kind of thinking through a lot of these things. I really loved something that you brought up a few weeks ago, Lisa, was the fire drill idea that sometimes you have to think through and practice. That's why we do fire drills. You want to talk a little bit about that? Because that's actually, I've since you've said that, I've been thinking about fire drills in my life for the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea goes back to the fact that we all have different ways of sort of dealing with sort of a flooding or an activating event, right? Like some of us freeze, some of us want to run away, some of us want to fight, right? And just depending on the context, any of those situations, freezing, fleeing, or fighting can be problematic, right? Like sometimes we might be in a situation where we freeze, where we wish we would have fought. And sometimes we'll be in a situation where we fought, where we wish we would have run away. But we can't actually choose a different response when we're flooded, because our frontal cortex shuts down, and that's the part of our brain that allows us to do something that's not already a habit or not already instinctual. And so we can't choose. So if you're a freezer, if you're someone who freezes when there's a loud noise, and the loud noise is a fire alarm, you can't actually just choose to get up and walk out of the building. And that's why we make people practice. That's why elementary schools, over and over again, teach children this physical response of standing up and walking out when they hear the loud noise, because now all of us have practiced it and we know our body knows what to do. We don't have to engage our frontal cortex. We don't have to think, what do I do? Because if we have to think, what do I do? The game is already over, because our brain, our what do I do brain is shut down, and the primitive brain, the habitual brain is the one that's in charge. So if we know that we're going to be in a situation and our instinct is going to be to freeze, but that it wouldn't be appropriate in that situation, we have to practice something else. And that is why, thinking ahead and figuring out, what is it that I would probably do in this situation, but what would be more in line with what would be more effective or more healthy, and then we actually have to physically practice it. Because if we just plan it, that is still something that our frontal cortex would have to access, because we haven't physically practiced it. So once you come up with the fire drill, you have to actually physically practice doing it. And so you might think through, okay, I'm going to the grocery store. I know that if someone approaches me and gets too close, I'm going to freeze, but I'd really rather run away. you know, like practicing it mentally can work somewhat, but also, you know, like giving yourself an opportunity to like practice it physically if you can.
And I think this is what happens a lot of times in therapy and coaching sessions is role modeling. And a lot of people, when I ask people to role model, at first it's awkward and it's kind of, you know, like people are like, do I really have to? And yet that's kind of what we're doing, is a physical manifestation of having the conversation or setting the boundary or whatever. And so that's kind of a technique that's used a lot in a lot of therapeutic settings. So any other ideas as far as boundaries and how to do them and what to be thinking about?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking as Lisa's talking about the fire drill, and I've been thinking about it for weeks also. I'm thinking about how it would probably be a good time as different areas are opening up and trying to open up our societies again, for families or the people that you've been quarantining with to talk to each other and have some ideas, especially for our kids, about how they are going to handle this kind of thing, because kids just want to be kids, and they, you know, depending on their ages, they, you know, the younger kids just have no concept of what this is. So starting to you know, I don't know. I noticed yesterday, I happened to go up, there was a flyover of F-35 airplanes from Hill Air Force Base that did a low flyover all the way through the state, just in support of our health care workers. And so my kids and I went up to a hillside, and because we wanted to see them from a good vantage point. And there were a bunch of people. We were not the only ones with this idea, right? So everyone was in their little groups, you know, trying to stay 6 feet away from the other ones. But you could see little kids were so excited, and their parents were just going, "Oh my gosh, stay away from those people. You're getting too close." Like there's a lot of anxiety that's going to be going on with this. But maybe having some conversations, because this is hard. This is hard to deal with. This is hard to manage. My son yesterday was like, my friends are walking over to the Park 5, this little, you know, place where they can get drinks and cookies, and you know, I want to go with my friends. And I noticed all of the conflict in me with like, oh, I want to keep everybody safe. I want to do my social duty of, you know, trying to follow the guidelines. And I'm so sad for him if all of his other friends are doing it, and I don't want him to miss out. And I don't, you know, I'm having all these feelings myself. Like it's a lot to navigate for all of us. So maybe talking as a family and prioritizing, like what are our priorities as a family? What is our duty to something larger than our family? What do we think about this? And what are some strategies that we can use when people are asking us to get together? And what kind of boundaries do we do? And what does that look like? Having some plans, you know, working with each other on that, I think would be really helpful as we start stepping into this next phase.
Awesome. Jenny, do you have any final thoughts or ideas as far as boundaries or just self-care tips during this time with these topics?
Yeah, I mean, this is getting a little bit into boundaries in the home, but I was thinking, you know, what happened between a couple during this time? You know, you're as parents leading the family, or you and your partner, you know, having different work schedule, different demands being placed on you. I think the idea of having conversations around that is great. And to notice what is driving the boat. Is it fear or is it logic? So as you start talking about this, if you're comfortable, you know, sharing, you know, I have some fears, I have some insecurities about this. And if you can share that with your partner or your children or who you're living with, and they can accept that, you'll be able to kind of maybe come up with some good, better strategies or plans. I think it's nice when you can share your fears around something so that the people that you live with can accept that and, you know, help you manage that.
Awesome. Lisa, final thoughts from you?
My brain is blank. I have quarantine brain.
Well, you gave us a great breakdown of the
We all
fire
do.
drill, so very useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think just
Yeah.
really trying to really think through what I have control over and what I don't have control over. And I think Jana said that already. So just, like really try and embrace the things that you can control and let go of the things you can't. Because what else can you do?
Yeah, right. Well, good. I want to thank you all. I just, my thoughts are, let's be kind, and quite frankly, for the amount of shift and change that we've experienced as a nation and even as a world, I've been super pleasantly surprised, that we haven't had like huge riots or looting or just, I think that we've done an amazing job as a human family, really, for the most part, honoring boundaries, being careful, being concerned about safety. I hope that we can be smart as we continue to shift, and we will hopefully take some precautions to keep each other safe as we start to interact more with each other. And I hope that you'll notice what you're irritated by. So if you find yourself irritated, that maybe you would invite that question into your life. What is it that I'm irritated by? Where do I feel a lack of control? What value am I leaning towards, safety or freedom, and why? Why are those things important to me? How am I doing in communicating those things to others? And then don't let the outliers skew your perspective, because I do think that the news and the media usually do. The interesting story is the story that isn't common. And so the non-common story right now are the riots, or not the riots, but the people who are, maybe more upset or doing these types of, why can't I think of the word? Protests. Thank you. That are doing protests and things. And for the most part, like somebody mentioned, 80 to 90% of the people are just really kind of on board with a lot of these things and are sharing similar approaches. So let's remember our commonalities in all of this. And as usual, I hope that you're finding yourself in a somewhat well and healthy space. We here at Symmetry Solutions do offer online services. We are a telehealth center. We offer both wellness coaching and teletherapy, depending on location and licensing issues and things of that nature. We also in-office in certain places, but not right now, not for probably a few other weeks. And we have a blog that we do off the Symmetry Solutions page. In fact, Jenny, who was just starting to talk about couples and things, did an excellent blog on how to deal with your spouse during the COVID process. You can find us at symmetrysouls.com. That's SOLS, and I'll make sure I'm linked to that. We have a weekly blog that comes out. You can find us all on there as far as if you want to engage with our services. We each have a webpage that tells you a little bit more about us and also the other providers who haven't been able to join us today. And we try to do this every Friday. So please tell us what you'd like us to cover. Give us your questions. You feel free to interact with us when we're having these and ask questions or make comments along the way. And also, if we're not a good fit for you, we may be able to steer you in a better direction. So still feel free to reach out to us, because we may have resources that we can at least tell you in your particular area where you might be able to reach services for your particular situation. So let's all prioritize our well-being and our mental health and our relationships during this very challenging time. We here at Symmetry hope to be part of your solution to that. So I hope everybody has a great weekend. Take care. And until next week, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.